we moved to Serbia, and that's when I started to study more about Bitcoin and realizing, wow, this is actually amazing. Bitcoin it's the thing I've been looking for. It's that thing, that truth that I've been looking for. I've always had an innate feeling since I was young that things were not right in this world, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. We were always led down different excuses and explanations, but never to the source of it. Thankfully, thanks to the lens that Bitcoin has given me to understanding what Bitcoin is and then learning about monetary history, about what money is, that provided me the lens to understand a lot about what's going on in this world. I couldn't look back. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And here I am today. We are attempting to speed up hyper-Bitcoinization. That's it in a nutshell. Hyper-Bitcoinization is happening whether you like it or not. All money will tend to one, but we are just trying to facilitate it and make the experience, make it as smooth and as quick as experience as possible. That's our mission.
Greetings and salutations, my fellow plebs. My name is Walker, and this is the Bitcoin Podcast. The Bitcoin time chain is 875026, and the value of one Bitcoin is still one Bitcoin. Today's episode is Bitcoin Talk, where I talk with my guest about Bitcoin and whatever else comes up. And today, that guest is Princ Filip, the hereditary prince of Serbia and Yugoslavia, and the chief strategy officer of Jan 3. Philip is a fascinating and fantastic guy who I've had the pleasure of meeting in person several times, and it was great to get him on the show and pick his brain today. Our conversation ranged across quite a lot of topics, from nation-state Bitcoin adoption to monarchy versus democracy, top-down versus bottom-up Bitcoin adoption, Bitcoin strategic reserve game theory, Bitcoiner world leaders, big things coming in 2025, and a whole lot more. Before we dive in, do me a favor and subscribe to The Bitcoin Podcast wherever you are watching or listening, but I personally recommend you listen on fountain.fm because not only can you send Bitcoin to your favorite podcasters to give value for value, but you can earn Bitcoin just for listening to podcasts. Check out bitcoinpodcast.net for episodes and additional resources. Head to the show notes to grab discount links for my sponsor Bitbox, or go directly to bitbox.swiss/Walker and use promo code Walker for 5% off. Send an email to hello@bitcoinpodcast.net if you have feedback or if you're interested in sponsoring the Bitcoin Podcast. And if you find the show valuable, consider giving value back by giving it a zap on Nostr or a boost on Fountain. I truly appreciate it. Without further ado, let's get into this Bitcoin talk with Princ Filip. I'm not a live streaming pro like, let's say, BTC Sessions or Nico and some of those guys. So I do what I can. I need to get a Jamie like Joe Rogan has. That's when you've made it as a podcaster, is when you can be like, hey Jamie, can you set that up for me?
Exactly. And I've been listening to Peter McCormack. What's his guy called? He's got like, can you? But the thing is, he just gets him to use Chat GPT. It's like,
I know, I love it. No, Danny.
Danny, Danny. Yeah.
He's an awesome dude, and I was super happy to see that he's reinvigorating the What Bitcoin Did brand. Just because that show was the one that I still to this day listened to the most in terms of Bitcoin podcasts. And I think everyone was a little bit bummed that it was kind of like, oh, it's going away. I get Peter's whole rationale for doing it. Happy that he's crushing it with Mr. Obnoxious. But when I saw Danny was coming back out with What Bitcoin Did, I was like, oh, this is good. The world needs more.
Yeah, I haven't listened to the first episode. That was with Jeff Booth, I believe. I just saw that recently.
I think he had Jeff Booth, he had Checkmate, and he had Rob Hamilton maybe as well.
Nice.
So he's crushing it. I firmly believe, there's always like the meme like, oh, there's too many Bitcoin podcasts. I firmly believe we do not have enough Bitcoin podcasts until there are more Bitcoin podcasts than traditional finance podcasts. And there are a lot of those. So we've got a long way to go, in my opinion.
What's the ratio?
I have to.
You check that one out. We can use ChatGPT. Where's your Danny?
Yeah. Let's see. How many finance podcasts are there? Let's see. I'm my own Danny. I'm my own Danny, my own Jamie. Let's see what ChatGPT says on this. I'm actually kind of curious. All right. Searching the web. It's challenging. Okay. ChatGPT is not even giving me a straight answer. You know what, ChatGPT, you're done. But there's at least lists of top 100 finance-only podcasts, and I mean, I have to imagine the total number of Bitcoin podcasts is maybe a couple hundred,
right?
Across different languages and everything, sure, but we've got a long way to go. In my humble opinion,
hard money podcast, Bitcoin only.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh man, Philip, it is good to see you. I'm trying to think. Last time we saw each other, it's been a while now.
Last time we saw each other was
El Salvador, maybe.
No. We saw each other since then. I think it was El Salvador, probably. That's 2 years ago.
Man, time flies. That's wild. Are you going to El Salvador for the Plan B?
Sadly not. So I've been invited, and it's a shame. I've been invited to another event, not Bitcoin. It's a Serbian event in Vienna for the Svetosavski Ball. That's like the Saint Sava Ball in Vienna, which is like a massive ball, Serbian organized ball that's been happening for I don't know how many decades now, but it's like we're one of the guest honors there, and it's right over the same base as El Salvador. Sadly.
That's tough. It's one where you're kind of let's say you need to attend.
I have to attend, especially if we've been invited to it. Then for sure.
Yeah,
but there will be more El Salvadors. I mean, there's adopting next year, and that will be. And this year in El Salvador in January, it will be it's going to be around the 30th of January, whenever it is. Mm-hmm. Who knows what the price of Bitcoin will be? But then adopting next year in November, who knows what the price of Bitcoin will be there? But it's it might have crashed, so we might be picking up some cheap sats again, which I'm always hopeful of. It's ripping today.
It's funny you reach that point, and I haven't been in Bitcoin for that long. It's been since 2020 when I finally stopped ignoring Bitcoin and went down the rabbit hole and decided to become humble and realize that I didn't know really anything about money. And even just since then, it's like the longer you get into it, at first you're like, I love seeing the price go up. Then a little bit later, you're like, I love seeing the price go down. Like I want my dollars to buy me more sats. Like I don't want these sats to be so expensive, but Bitcoin doesn't care. It just keeps on chugging.
Exactly.
Man. Well, I'm glad we got the chance to do this today. I was just I think I mentioned this to you. I was just in Serbia, actually, as part of a larger business trip in Europe. So that was my first time in Serbia. I was back and forth between Belgrade and Novi Sad. I wish I would have gotten a chance to do more sightseeing, but it was pretty much all business, unfortunately. So I'll have to make it back for a more relaxed trip in the future, bring the family.
Well,
but,
you, Carl and Apollo, definitely welcome here. It's a big, big country. There's a lot to visit here. And come visit the palace. We just moved in a few months ago, and it's good. It's great out here. Obviously, we have there's some issues going on with politically out here, but we're not going to go into that. We'll talk about Bitcoin stuff.
Yeah. That works. I mean, political issues are that's the one thing that I think every country in the world has in common, or I should say citizens of every country have in common.
All political issues really are derivatives of money issues. So
it's kind of a perfect lead into talking about the name of this show, the Bitcoin Podcast, talking about Bitcoin as money. I think the first time I saw a clip of you, like before we had met in person, was you were on a Serbian talk show, I believe. And
correct.
The clip went pretty viral because, I remember one of the parts that was funniest to me was the host was basically like you were just going through this like incredibly succinct summary of Bitcoin, money, everything. And the host is kind of like shocked that you're giving this advice away for free. Like what you're just telling people this, and you're like, yeah, they need to know. Was that the first time you had mentioned Bitcoin in any sort of like a public setting?
It wasn't the first time I came out as a Bitcoiner. Now, I've talked about this before. No, it's the first time I came out and publicly. Like you, I became a maximalist around 2020, but I first bought Bitcoin in 2017, but at the same time was distracted by other stuff out there, as a lot of people experience the same thing. And then 2020, when the whole COVID mania happened, I thought I knew how to. I mean, I've said this spiel many times before, but I'll say it again. I mean, I was working in traditional finance, TradFi as it's known in the Bitcoin world, for over a decade. Well, actually close to 15 years at that point. And you kind of think you know how it all works, but there's one thing a lot of people in TradFi don't really know is what is money. And that's one thing I started questioning about 2020 when I just didn't question it until 2008. I just thought corruption. I thought systemic corruption. I thought, yeah, it's just big cyclical bullshit and stuff. And then all this QE came about. Couldn't quite wrap my head around that. That was around 2008, 9, 10. The Euro debt crisis. Still was not really thinking about what is all this. I'm just thinking, yeah, this is part of the way that we fix stuff. Interventionism is okay. I was still a bit into the whole Keynesian world and things like that. And then 2017, got introduced to Bitcoin, bought. Realized that's okay. There's a supply cap of 21 million. That's scarcity. That's an inflation hedge. That's wonderful. That's great. So what does that actually mean? But didn't really dig into it until 2020, when the whole stimulus BS started happening again to a next level, where they were actually giving people checks in countries where normally they wouldn't really be giving people checks for very questionable circumstances. And I was thinking, where is all this money going to lead? And yeah, see what's happening today. So I started questioning Bitcoin then, and then I started, the old saying, as I always say, is I started reading things like Bitcoin Standard, picked up 21 Lessons by Gigi, reading his incredible Twitter threads as well, going onto Bitcoin Twitter, meeting getting acquainted with the maxis on Twitter and seeing them do their thing. Love and toxicity as well. It's great. It was hilarious, and I started to get it bit by bit. Things made more sense. I think one of the things that really started to make was a proper clicking moment was understanding low time preference and understanding the difficulty adjustment. I don't know why those two things, but just were really beautiful. The low time preference thing was just basically to do with because it links in nicely with Monarchy, and it links in nicely with just the world that we know, the instant gratification world that we live in, and the cure to that is something that is obviously of delayed gratification. And the difficulty adjustment, just the way that worked out beautifully, when it was proven how beautiful it worked out, how beautifully it works in 2021 when China banned mining, and you just saw the biggest downward adjustment ever, and it just becoming more decentralized. Just thought that was just so cool. Anti-fragile at its finest.
Those two things for me, I think, were also, it was reading the Bitcoin Standard and hearing, or seeing how Safe explained low time preference was really like something shifted. It's the same thing when I read the Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth, and he said, those simple words, technology is deflationary, and something clicks, and once it clicks, it's like, nope. You can't forget that you learned that. You are changed now for the better, I think. Everything makes so much more sense. But you also realize, like, oh wow, you start to realize, especially like with the technology being deflationary, you start to realize the true extent of the theft that this fiat system enacts on people. Because if you think, if you just look at CPI inflation in the US, you think, a couple % a year, even during the worst part of COVID. Yeah, it got a little bad for a second, but now, it's come back down, right? And then you realize that, no, it never comes back down. It compounds. And they're not just stealing from zero. They're stealing from a negative baseline. Everything should be getting cheaper, and it's not. Why is that? And that, for me, was just like, whoa. Like, I'm changed.
You look at the compound, you look at the graph, you look at it just getting bigger and bigger, and then you realize that's actually not a very good measure of CPI. Of CPI is not a good measure of inflation. Then you start going down what Michael Saylor has to say. I know. I mean, most Bitcoiners out there have to say that I realized that actually the numbers behind inflation are not accurate. How do they calculate those baskets? How do they replace goods with new goods that have less inflation? You realize that it's all one big game, and we're all being had.
It's as George Carlin said, it's a big club and you ain't in it. And it's, yeah.
Well, as a rule, I thought I would have been in it, but things happen. Things happened around the Second World War. Probably leading up to the Second World War, actually, when my great grandfather was assassinated. I think some people maybe didn't want us to be part of the club anymore. We were representing something that was a bit greater than what was planned for post Second World War. But I don't want to speculate. I don't want to go into conspiracy theories over here. But there's why were monarchies taken out? Why all of a sudden were good book to read on this, actually, that will touch on this is a book that Safety introduced to me. You know about it very well. It's The Democracy, the God That Failed. And I know I brought this up in Nostr the other day, because I joined Nostr recently. I actually got my key in the beginning of 2023. It's not like Twitter where it shows you how OG you are, but I'm going to ask Milan from Primal to see if he can get those keys up. But I didn't actually get involved, start posting until like, about 2 months ago. But anyway, I saw this one post that Jack, former Twitter Jack Dorsey. He posted something like, he says, freedoms, not kingdoms. And I know he was probably referring to freedoms in terms of Nostr and not kingdoms like Twitter. But I just went in there and I said, I said something about actually, he's still in the democracy phase. Wait till you get to the monarchy phase. And I just wanted to get discussion happening. And where was I coming from? This was that book, The Democracy God That Failed. The first chapter is fantastic in explaining what low time preference is. And that led me to understand that why monarchies were taken down. I mean, taken down. What happened post the creation of the Federal Reserve after the decision was made on Jekyll Island? Then in 1913, creation of the Federal Reserve. Then you had this full blown out war, which involved most European countries in very complex situations and relations. To then First World War, you had some of these monarchies being slowly wiped out to the point where the Second World War, then a lot of these monarchies became neutered. I say neutered. They turned away from being absolute monarchies to being constitutional parliamentary monarchies, and they were just the monarch part of the governance system was just a representation. They had some powers to annex to go to a check on the executive, on the that was in case something horrible goes on, but no one ever exercised that. This governance model was taken out completely and replaced with to sum it up as Hopper says it, is democratic republicanism. And you just have to look at you just have to look at the facts pre-First World War to post-First World War and understand that under monarchies, there was a lot less taxation. And under republics, under democracies, a lot more taxation. Why is that? Well, that's the low time preference aspect kicking into the governance model of monarchies, I should say. Monarchies are all about taking as little as possible today to leave as much as possible for your sons and your generations to come. That family wants to hold that position for as long as possible. So their incentive is tied to the stability of the country. So you will want to tax your citizens, have very strong private property rights. So there's no revolts, there's no revolutions, there's no uprising. And if you can keep your citizens cool and free and responsible, then you've got a great thing going on. And on top of that, that also was one of the reasons why it was probably messed with by ulterior outside forces, is a monarchy is hard to control because a monarchy cares about its citizens and citizens only. Yes, it will have good foreign relations. That's what a monarchy does. It has good foreign relations. It wants to limit amount of war, confrontation, and so forth, because those are costly, especially under a hard money standard. But then come in a loose money standard, and with and then come in democracy, and then all of a sudden the incentives get reversed, and outside influences are it's easier to be influenced by the outside. And I guess look what we have today. I mean, just to sum it up, we can go into it deeper, but
no, I think this is something I've talked with Saif about too when he came on, because I think it's really fascinating. I think in the U.S. especially, and this is just speaking from like personal experience, we have a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to the idea of monarchy, because this is the United States of America. We kicked the British crown out. No, we don't want any kings over here, et cetera, et cetera. And it's very easy to have that knee-jerk reaction without thinking too much more deeply into it. But then, as you said, the more I've started going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, it leads you into these other rabbit holes of realizing that, okay, first of all, no system is perfect. We know that democracy certainly isn't, because it tends to descend into mob rule eventually on a long enough time scale, right? Like this is, are you familiar with Polybius? He's the Greek philosopher. He came up with the idea of anacyclosis.
Anacyclosis, yes.
Yep. So for anyone that's not familiar, it's basically these 6 stages that governments always go through. It's, monarchy starts out with, like a monarchy ruled by one. They're typically benevolent. And then a kingship turned into kind of a tyranny where there's some corruption of the monarchy that happens. Then we move to aristocracy, which is kind of a good thing at first, rule by the best or a select few, but that descends into oligarchy, and the aristocracy is corrupted by a few people, and then that moves into democracy, but then that often descends right back into mob rule after democracy is corrupted, and then
repeat that until to full-blown autocracy. Autocracy, is it at the end?
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. But I remember someone posted that in the replies to my quote retweet against Jack Dorsey, and I said, Bitcoin fixes that. They didn't have Bitcoin.
That's the interesting thing.
That's the interesting thing is that they didn't have, even under gold standard led to fiat. So, but now fiat led to Bitcoin because we had to fix something. We had to fix it. And so I believe that's now, given that the Bitcoin is, because of its immutability and it's hard to control, it will lead to less opportunity for there to be continuing style driven inequalities, and therefore monetary influence by the top over the people who are, I'm trying to get my words out here nicely, but by those who are at the bottom end of the monetary pecking order. And I guess that's kind of how these systems that you were talking about, one leads to the other, basically, because really there's a breakdown in financial incentives, not incentives, but financial freedoms, and then that leads to the next stage. Whereas if you had Bitcoin from the start, I think you won't have such strong, you would probably stay at the monarchy and aristocracy stage of the
that's the interesting thing, because it's all about incentives, right? And if we know that there has never been a form of money that has not, over a long enough time horizon, basically been corrupted. As you said, even the gold standard, great, sounds good, but that is what led to this fiat aberration. Every fiat currency eventually fails. I'm of the opinion that just about every revolution is ultimately a monetary revolution under the surface. Like you look at, if you want to look at, or the fall of an empire is also the fall of a money. If you look at Rome, the revolution, the sense of look at something like the French Revolution and the fiat inflation of the assignat. It's not like something, to take the French Revolution example, it's not like it just happened out of a vacuum and all of a sudden people said, we don't have food, and look at these fat cats, they have food and they're, breaking our backs, and let's chop all their heads off. It's like, no, why did that happen? Why didn't they have food? Well, it's because they started inflating their currency. And then they started imposing price controls. And they started doing all the things that lead in only one direction, and that's to an eventual collapse of the money. And when the money collapses and people can't buy food, they tend to not take that very well. And they tend to ride in the streets and maybe, sharpen their guillotines. Well, and so
I'm going to say something against the French Revolution, because that's when we had the first instances of communism coming into being introduced. And I think that Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette are getting a lot of bad rep.
Bitcoin doesn't care if you're an individual, a corporation, or a nation state. We all get the same rules. And that means you, an individual, can be sovereign when you hold your own keys. And the best way to do that is to go to bitbox.swiss/Walker and use promo code WALKER for 5% off the fully open source, easy to use Bitcoin only BitBox02 hardware wallet. Then get your Bitcoin off the exchange and into your own self-custody. Bitcoin is ripping, and your stack will soon be worth a heck of a lot more in fiat value than it is today. So now is the perfect time to make sure you have your security locked down tight with Bitbox. Plus, and I cannot emphasize this enough, but the BitBox02 is easy as hell to use. Whether you're brand new to Bitcoin, it's your first time setting up a hardware wallet and you're a little bit nervous, or you are a well-seasoned psychopath. Again, it's Bitcoin only and fully open source. You can head to their GitHub and verify that for yourself. No need to trust me or Bitbox. When you go to bitbox.swiss/Walker and use the promo code WALKER, not only do you get 5% off a great piece of open source Bitcoin only hardware, but you also help support this podcast. So thank you.
Because people claim, the historians today, let's call it the unread, the research historians, actually don't realize that actually they're not they weren't actually that bad. Actually, Louis XVI in the first half of his reign was his first half of the reign was marked by attempts to reform the French government, like abolishing serfdom and reducing instances of the death penalty, and like increasing tolerances for non-Catholics. And he tried to even end the state monopoly on grains to make bread cheaper. But this had this resulted in the bread in the elite having problems with him. And what happened was that there was subsequent years there was a bad harvest, which obviously drove the price of grain up, and which led to the price of bread prices went up. There was food scarcity, and that kind of just contributed more to the unpopularity of the monarchy, which was driven by propaganda by outside forces wanting to take down the monarchy and replace it with something, communism. Well, by a group of people, the Jacobins, who were basically the far left group who were the basic ones who. I'm not sure who's. People think that the one the individual, the person who should be thanked for communism is Marx and Engels, but I think there's other people behind that. But I'm not going to go into that. So yeah, even the whole phrase that Marie Antoinette supposedly uttered when she said her people are suffering, let them eat cake. That was never actually uttered by her at all. If you do your research, that was never uttered by her. It's kind of that they met a very horrible end, because there was, as you said, it was driven by an elite group of individuals wanting to take down the monarchy so they could be in control, and they used the uneducated masses, the mob, to do their biddings for them. And this has happened and in return they promised the mob, the people, the uninformed public, better conditions. This has been repeated many times in history. It also happened with the Russian Revolution and the takedown of Tsar Nikolai II, the Romanovs, by the Bolsheviks. So again, driven by a change in monetary incentives and a change in system, which is communism. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because this is also close to my heart, because we also experienced, luckily we didn't experience such a a brutal end. The Karageorgevitches are still alive now. Maybe not as many as we were in the past, but we're still alive, and we're here. And some of us, one of us, is a Bitcoiner.
Philip, can you actually talk a little bit for folks who are not familiar with you, who are not students of history, or maybe have been I don't know. I think you've been making the rounds pretty well, so I would imagine people would have to be a little bit living under a rock to not at least know of you at this point.
I was living under a rock until a couple of years ago as well. So, also, for the record, I'm not a historian. This is all stuff that I'm reading. I'm starting to be pointed in the right direction. Hopefully, be pointed in the right direction. What Bitcoin does, as we talked about before, it's Bitcoin. I mentioned this now at Bitcoin Mean at the conference, that it just came out of me, and I think I've probably heard it. A lot of Bitcoiners just hear stuff there and they just repeat it, but it sounded really cool because it's true. Bitcoin is 16 years, almost 16 years of unadulterated truth that no one has ever been able to manipulate, change. It's immutable. It's completely, it's a string of truth that's growing and growing. And the more it grows, the more it exposes the system. The more it, who was it that was talking about this a couple of years ago when I was getting orange pill? They're talking about how Bitcoin ostracizes people. So people come into Bitcoin wanting to change Bitcoin, but it ends up changing them. And those with the egos who think they can change it, maybe with a bit of money or so forth, that fiat mindset, realize that they can't. So they end up getting ostracized. So it kind of exposes people. It acts like a truth serum. Bitcoin is like a truth serum, and it just exposes not your weaknesses. It exposes intentional bad moral behaviors that are typically rewarded by the fiat system. But anyway, so going back to, I am not a historian, and my background is that I am I'm a prince, but from a non-functioning monarchy, because our monarchy was abolished in the 1940s at the end of the Second World War, and it was replaced with communism. My father, if there was a monarchy right now, my father would be king. His father, so my grandfather, was King Peter II, the last king of Yugoslavia at the time. That's why maybe in my Twitter it says Hereditary Prince Filip of Serbia and Yugoslavia, because technically our last title was Yugoslavia. But if the monarchy was to be reinstated, there's no such thing as Yugoslavia, and it would be replaced. It would be Prince Filip of Serbia, officially. The history of my family goes back of the Karageorgevitch dynasty goes back to 1804, and that was the first Serbian uprising against the Ottoman Empire. Serbia, like many other Balkan countries, including countries like Romania, where Carlos from, places like that, Bulgaria, Greece, all these countries in the area were under Ottoman oppression for centuries. The Ottoman Empire was a huge empire that even lasted up until the 1920s, I believe. It's the last record, I think. Anyway, again, not the historian. But in 1804, there was a gathering that happened not too far away from Belgrade. There was a gathering of individuals of Serbian officers and generals of the secret army that decided that enough was enough, and they wanted to move for an uprising, a strategic uprising against the Ottomans. And there was a democratic vote between these individuals that met in this is in the heart of Šumadija. This is in this is about an hour and a half away from Belgrade. They met, and there was three rounds of voting, and on the third round, the first person that was elected thought that maybe he was too diplomatic. The second person was maybe he was too connected to the Ottomans, so it wouldn't have been a good move. And the third person was Karađorđe, and they were like, okay, great, he's great because he's ruthless. and he's very strategic, and he doesn't take any prisoners. Okay, let's go with Karađorđe. Karađorđe was like, don't know why I don't get his features, but he was like 6 foot, over 2 meters, like 2 meters tall, dark hair, big, brave character, and he led the first uprising, I should say, against the Ottomans, and he plowed through the Ottomans and liberated Serbia from Ottoman rule. So if you look at a map around 1804, one of these progression maps, you'll see that around 1804, then Serbia just pops into existence. And in the sea of Ottoman Empire, you just see Serbia like right in the middle, like a little island in the middle. He was then assassinated after 6 or 7 attempts. He was finally taken down by an axe several times. And there was a subsequent second uprising because obviously the Turks fought back, the Ottomans fought back. And then that was led by the Obrenović family, Miloš Obrenović, who then sets up, those are the two recent dynasties of Serbia. Then the Obrenović ruled for a certain period of time. The Karađorđević ruled for a certain period of time. Then the Obrenović were taken out. Basically, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but the story goes that they weren't taking care of their soldiers very well. So there was some inside uprising happening there. So they were assassinated. And then King Peter the First Karađorđević, so my great-great-grandfather, was coronated and became king 1902, I believe. And he was tasked with the mission to try and take Serbia's influence. Austro-Hungary had a lot of influence over Serbia, to try and get that away from that influence and do more trade with the East and the West, with Russia and with the French and the Brits, to try and become a little bit more independent. And he did that, and he was very successful. He spent most of his life in exile, running around with a secret name. He was known as Peter Mrkonjić, and he spoke Serbian with a French accent because he was brought up in France as well. He was an incredible figure. He led after he was king. He helped Serbia become more independent, more trade, gain more wealth, and he was actually quite a pioneer to say. He was actually quite a progressive for the time. He was a classical liberal. He actually had the idea of reforming the monarchy a little bit, so there is a little bit more, I want to say a little bit more state, but he understood that there's a need for a reduced state, but obviously that state needed, but it was still like an absolute monarchy in a sense. But with he had that book or essay on liberty by John Stuart Mills translated. That was his vision. He had that translated from English into Serbian. You don't have the eloquence to talk about what his vision was exactly, but he was very much about the individual. He was very much about the sovereign individual, like from quite an early start, but realized that you need to sort of progress a little bit with the governance model and with a monarchical governance model, and so move away from absolute monarchy to have something more as more of the classical liberals' idea that state should be there, but as a service provider to its people. Kind of what Prince Hanzadin II wrote in the State of this in the Third Millennium. Obviously, that's a bit more advanced, but that was his idea. King Peter I was a very heroic character. He led Serbia to re-liberate Kosovo in the Balkan Wars in 1908, 1910, 1912, and then again he went to the front lines of the First World War. By that point he was in his 70s and he was very tired, and he basically just said, okay, I've had enough. He beat the Austrian-Hungarians in the First World War. He did a lot, and he then handed over administration duties to his son, King Crown Prince Alexander, who was my great-grandfather. And then King Peter the First died in 1921, and then King Alexander came to power. He then took things to the next level and formed Yugoslavia. First, he formed the Kingdom of Slovenes, of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes, and Slovenia, and then it included Bosnia, Montenegro, and Macedonia. And this was as a way to unify the Balkan countries as an act of strength, to strengthen them against Austro-Hungarian and other influences. And it was very popular, although there was some infighting and stuff. He kept it together as a monarch does, as a unifying force. It was very prosperous. We were living under a gold standard. People were making wealth. People were private property rights were very much respected. People were creating a lot of assets. It was actually a beacon of ideological hope to the rest of the world. I look at Yugoslavia; they've got 6 nations and 3 or 4 religions, all living pretty peacefully under one crown. And he had to be taken out in 1934. He was taken out. The first assassination ever caught on camera, and his cousin became the regent king. My grandfather was too young at the time. Then when my grandfather became of age in the late 30s, it was First, Second World War and that mess. And then my father was born in exile, 1945, in London. And then he married my mother, who is a Brazilian princess. Another story. And and then that led to me, to my older brother being born 1980 in Chicago. Then my twin brother and I in 1982 in Washington. And then that led to 2002, after I became public about Bitcoin. And then my older brother in April 2022, he abdicated in my favor. So I'm now the next in line after my father.
Wow. First of all, it's just an incredible story to have that much family history that you can look back on, and not just any family either, one that is quite centrally positioned to a lot of massive historical shifts.
Right.
And I mean, to think that what I found just so amazing after meeting you and getting to chat with you and share some beers with you, looking forward to the next time we can do that, by the way. But
me too.
The fact that, you have this, you are a prince, you come from literally this incredible legacy, this incredible history. And at this moment in time, at this moment in history, you have decided that Bitcoin is the thing that you want to focus on, the thing that you can because you could be doing any number of things, and you decided that Bitcoin is the thing that matters to you. You're now operating as chief strategy officer of Jan 3. Jan 3 has its name day coming up fairly soon here. But I mean, I guess maybe the question is, why Bitcoin? Of all the things that you could focus on, of all the things that could demand your attention and your time, why Bitcoin?
Good question. Truth. I was how to formulate this? Being born in exile and never actually thinking there would be a hope that we would return back to Yugoslavia when I was young. It was still Yugoslavia. Seeing that, because I was born after Tito died. He died in 1980, and in the 80s and 90s, you saw the subsequent destruction and disintegration of Yugoslavia. These horrible battles that happened that were only stoked by the West, I would say. Sorry, my phone's running out. Sorry, that you saw horrible wars, and you see it on the news. You see all this destruction, death, and I wasn't very. It wasn't that I wasn't proud to be a Serb, or Yugoslav at the time. It was just that there was no hope. You thought there was going to be no hope. This country is completely disintegrates. I just didn't think I'll ever move back there. So I started building from a young age. My focus was just building my life in the United Kingdom, living in London, but then one thing led to another. I was working in finance. I traveled the world. And when I met my wife, 2017. Okay, so 2021. 2001. I should say that there was 2000. October 2000 is when Milosevic got ousted, and that allowed then an opportunity for my father and stepmother to move back to Belgrade and move into the palace. I didn't move back with them. I stayed in London because at that point I was like 19, 20 years old. I was going to university in London. I wanted my life outside of Serbia. I still went to visit Serbia at that point. I still went to go on holidays and went to see my father, to spend time with him here and there. But I was mainly focused on being outside of Serbia. I didn't have that feeling of being a Serb yet. Then as I got more experience, as I went through my education, became more, as I became older, I guess. Not older, what's the word? Just as I grew up, I started to think about Serbia more and more, and I started to think about my roots more and more. But it wasn't until I met my wife in 2006, wife-to-be, 2016, and we married 2017 and had our son 2018, where something really woke up inside me. And that also tied around the time when I discovered Bitcoin in 2017, bought Bitcoin 2017. I knew about it before, but didn't actually push buy in 2017. And when I married my wife and had our son, there was a few things that were happening around with my family since I was a kid that I wasn't very, let's say, there was a few things I needed to find out, some truth-finding, fact-finding missions. And I got to work. I was like, okay, I want to be back in Serbia at some point, but I'm still working in London. I still have my finance job in London. It's paying me well. It's paying me for my life to bring up my child, and it pays for my wife to do that, So, and things are okay here in London. But at some point I've got to move back. I'm speaking to my wife about this. Then, as I'm finding out stuff, as I'm trying to figure out what we're going to do, then the whole COVID pandemic hit, and that presented itself an opportunity. That meant that we were all sent to go to work from home. We were all working online, and I was sitting on my desk next to my bed. I remember that, and then I was thinking, like, after a week or two of doing this, I was like, hey, I could be doing this anywhere in the world. That was around March, April 2020. I go over into the bedroom. I speak to my wife is playing with our son, who was about just turned 2 at the time. And I was like, hey, we're moving to Serbia. When? I mean, as soon as possible. So that's about the time when I started questioning what was going on in the world with the finance, what we talked about earlier on about the whole stimulus, about QE, about the COVID shenanigans and all that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be doing what I'm doing now, but in Serbia. Let's move to Serbia. So we moved to Serbia, and that's when I started to study more about Bitcoin and realizing, wow, this is actually amazing. Bitcoin it's the thing I've been looking for. It's that thing, that truth that I've been looking for. I've always had an innate feeling since I was young that things were not right in this world, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. We were always led down different excuses and explanations, but never to the source of it. And thankfully, thanks to the lens that Bitcoin has given me to understanding what Bitcoin is and learning about monetary history, about what money is, that provided me the lens to understand a lot about what's going on in this world. And I couldn't look back. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And here I am today.
I love it. And, I'd love to talk a little bit too about what you're doing with Jan 3,
Sure.
Because I think that's, first of all, it's fascinating because the great thing about Bitcoin is that because this is an opt-in network, because there's no CEO, there's no marketing team, there's no nothing. There's developers and there's users and there's all different levels of users, from the individual to the corporation to the nation state, right? But Bitcoin doesn't care. It treats everyone the same. And what you guys are doing with Jan 3 is, I think, really fascinating because it's, while many approach Bitcoin adoption from let's say a bottom-up standpoint, There's this Jan 3 approach, which is a little bit more of top down, but I think with many of the same ideals in mind. And that's kind of the beautiful thing. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of like what is the mission of Jan 3? What is the goal of this organization? What do you guys hope to achieve?
We are attempting to speed up hyper-Bitcoinization. That's it in a nutshell. Hyper-Bitcoinization is happening whether you like it or not. All money will tend to one, but we are just trying to facilitate it and make the experience, make it as smooth and as quick as experience as possible. That's our mission. As you said, Bitcoin is a bottom-up strategy. It's a grassroots strategy. There's never been such a decentralized grassroots bottom-up strategy like this that's ever been discovered, and it's beautiful. But as you also correctly said, we are looking at some top-down strategies as well, and that is the niche that we found, what Samson found when he was presenting the Bitcoin bonds in El Salvador, the volcano bonds, and realized there's a niche here. This is an opportunity that we should be able to speak into nation states around the world and get them to understand what Bitcoin is. As you said rightfully as well, Bitcoin doesn't care about politicians. Bitcoin doesn't care about anyone. Bitcoin just does Bitcoin. But we have to teach people that Bitcoin can really help you. Bitcoin is there to make you financially sovereign, to make you financially free. The more you understand that, and the more you look into it, the more you study it, the clearer it becomes. So our objective at Jan 3 is to educate nation states, so politicians, be it from presidents, prime ministers, ministers, to members of parliament, about how Bitcoin can help them and their people. And we try to figure out plans of what sort of adoption they can come to agreement with. And as you know, Bitcoin has many forms of adoption, from just mining it, then to what's the big buzzword these days is the strategic asset reserves. So as a store of value, to what El Salvador did 3 years ago, which is MOE, medium of exchange. Obviously, we want all three to happen, but at the same time, Bitcoin doesn't really care if any of those happens. It's just going to happen. But we're trying to teach politicians that Bitcoin can be super useful and can help them achieve the goals that they want with their people. And this is also the thing that he's saying, that Bitcoin doesn't have a marketing team. Well, we are the marketing team. I'm not saying we, Jan 3, I'm saying all of us here, all of us maxis, whether we irritate people or not, we are driving the message of what Bitcoin is. And that's the beautiful thing about Bitcoin. It doesn't have money to pay marketing team. You have to, that's the beautiful incentive. One of the incentives of Bitcoin is it quite often, people who first get into Bitcoin, they first understand that they don't want to do anything else apart from shout about it. And then you get to the point where, like, actually, I can't be bothered. Let them figure it out. Which is kind of the case for a lot of us. But we are passionate about Bitcoin, and we're going to keep on talking about Bitcoin. And we've just figured out ways to monetize that or incentivize that drive for people to understand Bitcoin. And that's where Bitcoiners are become very entrepreneurial and creative when it comes to how to bring Bitcoin to the next level. So Jan 3 uses this opportunity to meet with nation states as a way to market Bitcoin, as a way to give it credibility, because we live in a world where people are very trustworthy towards the state. So if they see a president or prime minister or someone in charge talking or being photographed or mentioning Bitcoin, that's gonna help with adoption. That's gonna help with its credibility. And it's always, even if we just get a picture with the president, you're gonna get other people around, maybe another president in the country next door, saying, "Hey, what are they doing? What are they talking about?" So you're gonna get that game theory thing happening as well. So it's just another way of marketing Bitcoin. To get these conversations happening. But, that's our top-down approach, is just to get conversations happening, education, understanding, how Bitcoin can bring wealth to your country by mining it, because energy is money, money is energy, and how you can create these incredible financial Bitcoin-backed financial products like Bitcoin bonds to fund infrastructure projects just by using the surplus or wasted energy or new renewable energy sources from your country. So you end up taxing your citizens less and further developing your infrastructure. It's beautiful, right? That's the things that we're trying to promote with Jan 3. But there's also the other thing is that we also have our bottom-up tool as well, and that is Aqua. Aqua Wallet is what's going to help drive the adoption for the next billion people, because what we're talking about before is a top-down. Now we're talking about bottom-up. Aqua we're trying to make it the user interface, the user experience as easy as possible. Aqua came out Jan 3 this year, and it's organically grown to about 50K or maybe even close to 60K downloads without any marketing at all spent on it. The only marketing we've done is on Twitter and other social media platforms. We will soon have a budget for some other marketing, but we will do on the ground guerrilla style marketing. We're not going to sponsor podcasts.
That's all right. I won't hold it against you.
Thanks. We're going to shove it in the hands of people and get their hands dirty and transfer some sats from one person to another and get them to understand Bitcoin by seeing it work in the flesh. So no, I don't know if people are aware of Aqua. Aqua uses Aqua. The face of Aqua is like it splits Bitcoin into two sections: into the savings account, which is Bitcoin on the main chain, and then your spendings account, which is then Bitcoin on Liquid, which is also used for Lightning transactions. But there's another thing, and this might upset a lot of the maximalists with us, but there's USDT. There's another spending account section there, which is USDT. But that is also all held on Bitcoin Liquid sidechain. Reason why we are using USDT on the wallet is because USDT, whether you like it or not, is used more for transactionally in Latin America than Bitcoin is. So a lot of people use USDT and don't really care about Bitcoin. So we're trying to make that experience for the USDT user easy, but also have Bitcoin on the same, only Bitcoin on the same face. So they see the opportunity to then transfer over onto Bitcoin as a savings account. So we have going from the top to the bottom, savings account, Bitcoin main chain, spending account, Bitcoin on Liquid for Lightning transactions as well, and then USDT spendings account. And then we have great technology that will do the swaps from one to another using bolts and atomic swaps that you're able to then move from one to the other seamlessly. And that's just the start. We'll also all have the optionality to buy Bitcoin on it. And also sooner or later next year at some point to get debit cards, Bitcoin debit cards, and have the whole marketplace for Bitcoin and make it as easy as possible. And that's where we get the fees from, is from the swaps and also from other marketplace activities that we'll do. And we're trying to make it as easy as possible for the user to use. As our marketing says when you open the Aqua wallet, sometimes it says a wallet your grandmother can use. Yep. And of course, okay, it's self-custodial, so it's your keys, your coins, and it's open source as well.
And for anyone who has not tried Aqua, I would really highly recommend it. I have been using it since it was released and very much enjoy it. It's a smooth wallet experience. It is, and also as far as the USDT part goes, I want to point out that it's very important that you guys are doing USDT on Liquid, on Bitcoin sidechain, not on Tron, not on Ethereum. You're doing it on Liquid.
Here's the brilliant thing, right? Because as you know, USDT works. It has a much bigger network, and it's functioning on shitcoin rails like ERC20 and Tron and things like that. So you can actually, from those shitcoin rails, transfer to your Aqua wallet, but it's going to appear as Bitcoin Liquid. So we're siphoning away from the shitcoin chains, and when it's on our chain, it's when it's on in our wallet, in Aqua wallet, it comes out as Bitcoin Liquid. And we're making that experience super easy. You know, we're open right now. It's open to Tron and ERC20, but soon it's going to be open to the other USDT shitcoin rails, like I think Binance and Solana, Polygon, and things words I don't like to say, but it's true. But the great thing is that Bitcoin USDT on Bitcoin sidechain is the most efficient, the cheapest, and the best. And on the other shitcoin rails, they are now starting to have issues. I'm not technical enough to discuss it, but you can see that they're having fee issues, and operability issues. I will defer to someone else more technical to talk about that. But we're seeing the opportunity now that's I mean, you've seen what's happening now, that you've seen a lot of the shitcoin is now jumping onto Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Now they're going on to layer 2 as the new thing. We're building on Bitcoin. You know, I've seen accounts out there, like shitcoin accounts, like from 2-3 years ago, like they'd say, yeah, they're all about Ethereum this and Solana that and all this and that. And then they realize that their price shitcoin is not really the thing that was that was meant to be. And then all of a sudden they have, we're building on Bitcoin now. Yeah. But
well, it turns out when oh, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying it doesn't change anything. It doesn't change anything for us. It just shows that, you know, that it's all gonna go to one, and so it's eventually, you know, we're just gonna make it easier. That's the whole idea. Is that why we have this product, is we're gonna make it easier for people to transfer from whatever USDT shitcoin rail onto USDT Bitcoin, and it's going to be protected by the Liquid Federation, which was another great thing that's happened. Another great layer, one of the only 2 or 3 layer 2s that actually work.
And for those who have not tried Liquid, either USDT on Liquid or Bitcoin on Liquid, I would really recommend you check it out. The Liquid network has been operating as a federation for a number of years very successfully. And I know that there's often a knee-jerk reaction with some of this stuff to say, oh, well, that's, you know, USDT, who needs it? Just use Bitcoin. And the reality is that a lot of people in the world still wants that, right? And so why not give them, which Aqua does, an opportunity to use USDT on the Liquid network, on a Bitcoin sidechain, versus I think most of USDT's volume is on, a lot of it's on Tron, right? Like
Tron
the
and
majority of it in
yeah.
ERC20. So yeah, I love it. Siphon that off, pull it off, bring the monetary energy over to Bitcoin, and give them a great user experience. And again,
exactly.
I would highly recommend it.
Yeah, and if you want to pay in those other shitcoin sidechains, then it will easily do that for you. But while you're holding it in the wallet, everything is nice and clean in Bitcoin. Yeah. And going on to Liquid, I'm not technical enough to talk about this, but Liquid is also a great tool for easing the transition from TradFi to Bitcoin, because you can do so many things on Liquid that you can do in TradFi that you can't do anything anywhere else, and that's going to help drive adoption and do it in a very undisruptive, seamless, hopefully undisruptive way. The idea is not to have an abrupt, like, okay, we have TradFi one day and then we have Bitcoin the next day. No, it's never going to be like that. It's going to, adoption happens in peaks and troughs and wins and losers here and there, where we have layer 2 solutions like Liquid that will help that transition in a smoother way, where you can build those products that you can get on TradFi, but actually back it by Bitcoin. And you can do your Bitcoin bonds on Bitcoin Liquid as well. It's a great layer 2 solution. It just gives me so much hope having that Liquid and Lightning as solutions to not solutions as they're solutions. Sorry. to how we grow for adoption purposes.
Well, it's super interesting looking at the nation state landscape right now, and I think it's great that you guys you just as Gen 3, you have this kind of multi-pronged approach of, yes, top down, talking to the decision makers, politicians, leaders, but also, hey, we're giving a bottom up solution, Aqua, at the same time. And then with the kind of integration of the Liquid network as well, this is something I talked with Suriname presidential candidate Maya Parbu about. You know, she's looking at, and I hope she's fantastic. And I truly hope that she wins the election. I have a lot of faith in her. But this is what she wants to do, right? She wants to try and truly have the separation of money and state, but also to use these tools that we have available on Bitcoin, on Liquid as well, to be able to provide just a better, let's say, a better user experience as a citizen for people, which is an amazing thing. And I'm curious, as you're looking at the nation state landscape, I guess, what is the state of nation state adoption right now? How are you guys looking at it? Are the conversations you're having taking a different tone now that Bitcoin is really, we're at over 100K, 0.1 million,
Let's say that 2024 started off with a bang with ETFs being approved.
Yeah.
And just for the record, I'm not for ETFs because that's not getting to Bitcoin directly. And ETFs it's highly, what's the word I'm looking for? It's very much still tied to the traditional financial system, but it's great for adoption and it's great for number go up. And number go up is what that ultimately does drive adoption and people getting into Bitcoin. What got me into Bitcoin in the first place, and I'm sure many other people. So, people want to increase their wealth, and when you see numbers go up, it's always a good thing. And then we stick around for the monetary renaissance. So the ETFs did create a lot more conversations. Then, which I think was fantastic, was when Trump did a 180 on Bitcoin at the beginning of summer, and I don't know whether it was at the Bitcoin conference or was it somewhere else, but when he uttered those words, your right to self-custody, that was huge. A former president, now president-elect, saying that is huge. Obviously I don't know whether he fully understands Bitcoin or not, but I'm presuming that his children, Baron Eric, I met Eric the other day, actually, briefly, nice guy, get Bitcoin. I actually believe that they actually truly get Bitcoins. Whether they're 100% maximalist or not, I'm not too sure, but they get Bitcoin. Maybe that they're at the investor stage. I don't want to speculate or anything, but yeah, they get Bitcoin. They understand its importance, but also if you tie it back to what it means for America and for elections, is that it's a huge voter base. Now, if you have about, I think in America, better. You're in America right now. There's about 18 million people who own Bitcoin or some other shitcoin. And of those 18 million people who own Bitcoin or some other shitcoin, some of them probably have a lot of their wealth tied to it, so they will vote with their wealth. So it's a huge voter base, and it's also a hard voter base to quantify because, mainly young people, millennials and Generation X or whatever they call them, and the little ones. But they will only want they will only want candidates that are positive towards crypto in general, shitcoins, and mainly Bitcoin. Well, hopefully it will obviously hopefully they'll get to the point of I can't take away too much from the horrible administration that was the Biden administration. They did recognize Bitcoin as a commodity, and they did separate it from the rest, which was great at one point. So I give them some credence to that. But then all of a sudden, Ethereum managed to get into that category. But so then you realize, that's shady. But okay, it's something that the fact that they recognize Bitcoin as a commodity, and it set a precedent for the rest of the world, because whatever the SEC does, many of the other financial regulators around the world will hopefully copy. Just don't copy the Ethereum part. Yes, so the conversations after Trump started to talking about it, and then as soon as Trump was elected, we've had a lot more conversation, a lot more interest. We've already since then had a lot of conversations around the world with many smaller countries and some maybe larger countries. And I'm not going to allude to any announcements or anything like that, but maybe 2025 we could have some good news.
May I, without you obviously disclosing any specifics, because I don't want to put you on the spot for that, can you say in terms of, in terms of good news, more broadly, what does that look like for you guys? Does that look like strategic Bitcoin reserves for certain countries? Does that look like mining operations?
You'll see an ever increase in mining operations, and you will definitely see strategic Bitcoin reserves. Yeah, I think now there's a race happening right now as we speak. I mean, but when it comes to medium of exchange, that's a tough one.
Yeah,
but given its Bitcoin is acting nowadays when people, it sells better as a store of value right now than it does as medium exchange. Even though Bitcoin whole thesis is a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, it seems that the store of value parts of it, because of its scarcity, is what it's bringing a lot of people, because that's where the number go up. That's where the numbers go up. Is driving adoption.
Well, I think too the scarcity. I mean, and not just scarcity. It is absolutely finite, right? There's nothing else like that. I mean, you could even say gold. Okay, gold is scarce. There's a finite amount on Earth. But then how far out do we go? Do we go to the nearest asteroid that is chocked full of enough gold to make everyone a billionaire? There's different levels to that scarcity of gold. Do we start extracting gold from the salt water in the ocean where it's present and is just requiring enough energy to be able to extract it? Okay, so it's scarce, but not in the absolute way that Bitcoin is. And I think that this is where you see the game theory of both individual, but then, for the purpose of this conversation, nation state adoption start to play out. As you said, there is a race. I think that everyone has been very much put on notice right now. I think also from a corporate perspective, Michael Saylor has put everyone on notice for some years now. He hasn't been hiding this. This has been very public. He's been saying, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm doing it. You should do it too. And you see some other corporations picking up that mantle, Semler Scientific, Mara, Riot now, a few others. But at the nation state level, I think there's, at least from my perspective, there seems to be a growing acknowledgement, even hearing the way that somebody like Putin is now talking about Bitcoin, saying, who can stop Bitcoin? Nobody. There's an acknowledgement that this thing is here to stay and that this is a race, right? That there's some urgency here because the first mover, El Salvador, you could argue, was the absolute first mover. Okay, Kingdom of Bhutan as well is, mined a ton of Bitcoin with excess hydropower. But in terms of, let's say, G7 players, the first mover will have a massive advantage.
Correct.
Is that what you're seeing too?
Well, that's what we'll see. It's, as we said, Bitcoin doesn't really care, but in terms of driving, if one of the G7 adopts it as a strategic asset reserve or as a medium of exchange properly, then you will see others, or you will see price go up. Then you'll get Samson's Omega candle in action. Yeah,
he's waiting for it.
He's waiting for yeah.
Now it's
yeah. Sorry. It's just fascinating to see how quickly it's moving now with this cycle. That when I first got into it properly last cycle, I mean, I first got into it 2 cycles ago, but when I first started understanding what Bitcoin was, and that's when shortly after is when you saw the likes of El Salvador adopting it, and Michael Saylor doing his corporate adoption of Bitcoin. But then you have to wait now. Those 2 country and corporation and company. Sorry, El Salvador and MicroStrategy were, I guess, were the guinea pigs. Now we're in the second cycle. I think people are probably waiting to see how that would plan out, and it's obviously working very well for those 2 countries. I mean, for that country and that company. So I think now you'll see the next round of adoptions. But having said that, you're still going to get a lot of people that are going to be driving away from it, and a lot of people still have Bitcoin derangement syndrome and will always have it. I think there's a very good article by Jesse. How do you say his name? Crost.
Oh, Croesus.
Croesus, yes, Jesse Croesus.
Jesse Myers. His pseudonym is Croesus.
Croesus, that's it. never met the guy, but great fan of what he's written. And there's one article, I forget the name, but it's about why yuppies don't like Bitcoin.
Why the yuppie elite dismiss Bitcoin.
That's the one.
It's a great article.
I think it's one
great.
of the best articles out there. Really, I think it's definitely on a read to read list for many people getting into Bitcoin, because it really gives you understanding of why there's this managerial class out there that it drives them crazy, and that's the issue that we have also when we're doing when we're trying to reach out to nation states. We can't. I have, as a member of a royal family, I have certain ability to open doors, and that's great. But even that, you go reach out to someone and create a diplomatic channel with a country and say, oh, you want to talk about Bitcoin? It's not going to get anywhere. So even that, those top-down conversations actually happen from bottom-up efforts. They usually happen from people on the ground, Bitcoiners on the ground, who've identified a politician, a leader, or someone who might be interested in Bitcoin. And so they need help, so they come to us, and then we create a Telegram group, and that Telegram group, we have some conversations, and next thing what happens is we end up maybe having a meeting with the president or the prime minister or whatever, a government official or individual, and that it's all happened from Bitcoiners on the ground in that country. That's what happened in the case with Maya in Suriname, that she led us to the introduction to the government there. I didn't go, but Samson went. And very interesting meetings that happened there. And they were talking, maybe we'll do strategic reserve, put 1% of our treasuries in there. And then I think Maya then saw that all this happening, but the way the meetings were led and dealt with, and says, I'm going to do this on my own. This country needs better leaders, and she's up for the job. She understands what's needed. She knows what the people need, and I don't think the people quite understand what they need yet. But we're helping get the message across with her. So if anyone out there, just help Maya in her journey to try and educate the public, and hopefully she might win a position as a leader of her country. So
I hope she does. And that's the really cool thing now, is that I think that there's a new generation of leaders that are starting to make themselves known. Maya is one of them. And
I mean, Bukele was one of the first.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think it's going to take a couple of. So it's going to, as it takes a couple of Bitcoin cycles, it's going to take a couple of global election cycles. And global elections happen democratic elections happens usually every 4 to 5 years, on average. As price goes up and new candidates come in and they start to get educated and stuff, and they realize that they need Bitcoin on their platforms, then that will ultimately drive adoption, and you will see more candidates in the next 5 to 10 years. You will see candidates putting Bitcoin on their platforms as things that they're running for. You'll get more Mayas, hopefully, and you'll get some more Mayas, and hopefully end up with more Bukeles out there.
What are your thoughts about Milei in Argentina? Do you think that because he's obviously, he's an Austrian economist, right? He's a libertarian. He has spoken very favorably about Bitcoin. He's an intelligent guy, clearly. Do you think that Argentina is going to be in a place to make any sort of moves from, let's say, a strategic level?
They've already made moves on mining as well. So they've actually, with their national energy company, forget the name of it. We met with the energy company where we were in Buenos Aires 2 years ago. And they have a division that's mining Bitcoin. I think they've ramped up operations there, which is encouraging. But then going back to Milei, yeah, he is a Rothbardian, but he's not quite focused on Bitcoin yet, because in Argentina things are a little shitcoinery is very predominant in Argentina, and we saw this when I went there 2 years ago at La BitConf in Buenos Aires. That was a great moment. There was a very good moment there because La BitConf, even though the name suggests Bitcoin, was also about shitcoining as well. And Samson was invited to speak there. Jimmy Song was invited to speak there. And Vitalik was invited to speak there. And this happened just after the FTX crash. So this was November 2022. So the organizers of the conference decided to do a panel on the FTX crash and invited Samson, Jimmy, Vitalik, the organizer himself, and one or two other guys, one regulations guy and someone else. And that panel was the most entertaining panel I've ever witnessed. It turned into more of a Bitcoin versus Ethereum, Bitcoin v shitcoin session. And I mean, you can see the recording online. But anyway, going back to Argentina, I think Milei's approach is very free. It's, as a libertarian, very free market, let the market decide and stuff. So obviously he's not cracking down on he's not going to crack down. He's going to allow Bitcoin to happen. It's going to allow, but at the same time, he's not going to, I don't think there's any moves I see there of him differentiating between Bitcoin and the rest. And we're trying to get meetings happening there to try and, we have some leads and stuff, but it's a tough one to crack. Argentina's a different size. It's an order of magnitude much bigger country than El Salvador, and it's, given its history of financial disasters and its structure, they have a lot of shit to sort out, and that's why I think he's focusing mainly on government efficiency, on Doge.
Yeah.
on his Department of Government, as Musk and Thingy are going to be doing. But yeah, on cleaning up and loosening up the size of the state apparatus there. While he's doing that, it's he promised that he would take down the central bank, but you just can't take down the central bank. Like, one day you have a central bank, next day you don't. It doesn't work that way. That's going to take time. I think we've seen progress there. We've seen the inflation numbers that actually been reduced a lot, but I still think he's very much still in his mission, and we're still waiting to see what the results were going to be. He's got a huge task at hand, and still has, but there are some promising data that are coming out of the country. And hopefully he will leave such a mark that he will be re-elected again and continue his good work.
Yeah, it's certainly that he has a lot of irons in the fire in terms of cleaning up things there. But it's impressive what he's done already.
Yeah, the system was so rotten that so many people were benefiting from the from decades of interventionism, of socialism and stuff. It's not easy to clean that up overnight. I think he's the character to do it. He's that fiery, crazy guy that has the ability just to make it happen, to cut it, and to essentially to start cutting out those tumors. But at the same time, they're not all benign tumors, and some of them are quite malignant, and that takes time.
Yeah, I'm curious too. We were talking about monarchy earlier, democracy. The state generally, you guys are obviously focused on nation state adoption on multiple levels. But what do you think is the purpose of the state? Or maybe I should say, what is the purpose of the modern state? What is it actually supposed to do for the people that reside within its borders?
It's meant to attract people. It's meant to be a service company towards the people. A great book to read about this is the current head of the Liechtenstein royal family. His name is Prince Hans Adam II. In the early 2000s, he wrote this book, The State in the Third Millennium. And to sum it up, it's basically the state should act as a service provider to these people, attracting people as opposed to repelling them. And it's the vision that we will have. So I would say that it can be used. His model is also the model of many libertarians. He's a libertarian. He's an Austrian. I had the opportunity, the pleasure of meeting him last year at an Austrian economics conference that they organize every year in Vaduz in Liechtenstein. And he wasn't attending the conference, but later we had drinks at the palace, and he was there because he's a bit older. He's in his late 70s, but he still likes to socialize. Great guy, loves a bit of attention and loves a good chat and stuff. And I also met with some of the other members of the royal family who organized that conference. The other one's Prince Michael, one of his cousins, and Prince Philip as well, who's another cousin. And they all own Bitcoin. I wouldn't say they're at the maxi stage. They're at the investment stage, investor stage, I should say. But anyway, going back to the government's model, I think Liechtenstein is a great example. I know it's a small country. It's only got 40, 50,000 people, but they have a model that works because they're very wealthy. As when you're looking at these Keynesian metrics, GDP and all that sort of stuff, they don't really paint the full picture. But when you divide it and look at it per capita, you get a slightly better picture. And as a GDP per capita, Liechtenstein is probably one of the wealthiest countries in the world. And when you go there, you see it. You see it. There's a lot of nice cars. The place is absolutely spotless. Everything works. And it's also a free country. You can actually smoke in the restaurants as well. It's brilliant. It's you go a few minutes down the road. You're in Switzerland or what's the other? Yeah, I think Switzerland and the other. Please, my geography. Anyway, I'm not going to embarrass myself. But then all of a sudden you can't smoke in the restaurant.
Yeah,
Liechtenstein gets it. It's a good model. But I would also say that the other governance model that I like is in terms of democracy, and I say it's one of the most efficient. The only democracy that properly works is that of Switzerland. That is its decentralized canton system, where each canton has a local government, and within the local government, the elected MPs are not career politicians, and they actually have jobs. They actually go for sessions every, I don't know how many times a year, and they're hardly paid for it, but they're given a little incentive for it. And their democracy is much more direct. It's a model that's been working for a few centuries, and if you're looking at how democracy is meant to work, it works at that level, at that scale. When you have less than, let's say, 100 or 200,000 people, democracy, I don't think really works beyond that. Then you get to the point where you have huge possibility of having uninformed majorities with an informed minority controlling the system, which is the case in many republics and constitutional monarchies around the world. Then Switzerland has a federal government, and I'd say its only downfall is that federal government has yearly elections. I would say what would be a great model would be to have Switzerland's canton system with direct democracy, but the federal level would be a monarchy. So that's where you kind of get in Liechtenstein, but at a much greater level, a much bigger level. And the monarchy would be in charge of foreign policy, defense, and not just that, but this has to only work under a Bitcoin standard and a proper hard money standard, which is only Bitcoin. There's no other choice. That this is the next stage of the democracy I would see, is that particular model, that the monarch acts as not just a placeholder, but actually acts as a custodian to traditions, to customs, to family values, and to continuity, and also as someone who promotes foreign policy. Who goes about foreign policy for his country, and his incentives of his family being in place there for millennia to come is directly incentivized in the well-being of the country.
So It's fascinating.
I would say that, I have shat on democracy and I will continue to do that. And I've got to be careful how I do this, because people will take that negatively, because a lot of people in this world see democracy as freedom, which is not the case. And I don't see us going from democracies to absolute monarchies. I don't think that's ever going to work. But if we're going to be realistic, I think we can see democracies move to constitutional monarchies, and then constitutional monarchies move to something with more direct democracies in place. And then over time, things become a bit more decentralized as the money becomes decentralized. And then we'll move to something which I envision is small, is like a Switzerland cantons, but all glued together with, depending on the region, some bigger, some smaller, with a monarchy or some aristocracy in charge. You will, maybe some of those have federal governments, and you will have elections as well, but their main purpose of existence is to promote neutrality and continuity and stability over anything else, really, especially when the money is hard.
It's a fascinating thing to think about and to see where we may go in the next few years, because I think that one thing, at least most people should agree on, probably a lot may not, but the state apparatus in democracies. Look at the United States is a constitutional republic, right? But it's a constitutional democracy. Our state apparatus has gotten so much bigger and bloated than our founding fathers. I mean, they would be, they're rolling in their graves, seeing how massive.
Yes.
Yeah, it's disgusting, and how much waste that creates, because the state is not, in its modern sense, in any way a productive institution. It only exists based on theft, and that theft takes multiple forms. It takes the direct form of taxation, and then it takes the indirect form of the silent tax of inflation, perpetuated by the, quote, independent public-private central bank full of, that's just a cartel of private banks known as the Federal Reserve. This clearly, if it were not for technology driving down the cost of everything, I think that people would have rioted in the streets a long time ago. But the fiat system has bought itself some extra time, I believe, and this fiat mode of governance, because technology has basically hidden so much of that silent tax of inflation from the people. But right. I think, can only kick the can down the road for so long.
Technology is there to enslave us, but also to set us free.
Yeah.
And that's the not, I wouldn't say the irony, the paradox of it, that the democratic Republican model has allowed that, plus money printer, has allowed these election cycles to promise people things over time, and that's how these people remain in power, and that incentive structure is what leads us to crazy clown world that we are today. But at the same time, technology has progressed over time, and there are great things being built out there, and the internet obviously did a lot of great things, but it's also a great place for the spread. It's the information age, but it seems to be like that a lot of people are not getting the right information, and now we're questioning everything that we read. And no, I say we, those who are starting to understand that the media pre-internet was very much a state apparatus, or if it was run privately, it would have some sort of interest. Then along came the internet disrupted that, but still continued it and made it, and then accelerated it. And now we have things like Twitter, who were freed, but still not 100%. Then we have things like Nostr, but the problem with Nostr is it's still very much in its infancy, and there's still very much of an echo chamber for Bitcoin maximalists, but it's the start of something great. And I think it's beautiful. It's somewhere I can actually talk my mind. More so, I still got to be careful. But like on Twitter, if I tweet anything about Bitcoin, you'll see a lot of angry people talk, just polluting my my comments. I don't turn my comments off. I'm not into censorship.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just where this ties back to is I think that democracies and that what we were talking about before is how the democratic republicanism has led us to a point today where we have improved that technology to the point where that technology can now be used for or against us. And now some of us are realizing that thanks to the creations like Bitcoin, that we can actually use that technology for great things, and it's going to change, and it's changing us for the better.
Amen. And Philip, I want to be conscious of your time here. I didn't even realize we've run nine. Okay. So one thing I wanted to really ask you is I know that your pitch, let's say, to nation states is going to vary depending on what kind of country you're in. Are they very energy rich, for example? Do they have a lot of stranded energy? Do they have other issues? What level are you talking to? That's going to change. But I'm curious, just more broadly, like if there is some sort of a decision maker, or maybe somebody who is an aspiring decision maker in a country who is listening to this, who's still kind of on the fence about Bitcoin, or doesn't necessarily see the real value in this yet. They're not deep down the rabbit hole. What do you say to that person? What do you say to encourage them to say, your country needs this. We all need this.
That's the I was going to say the $1 million question. That's the Omega Candle question. Yeah, it's a tough one. That it depends, as you said, it depends on the individual. Really depends on the nation and the individual. I think that what helps is that people understand. The ones who understand Bitcoin the quickest are the ones who are suffering financially the most, who have the worst capital controls over them, who are living in the most tyranny, who have the worst financial system. We're living in the worst financial system. So places like Nigeria, Lebanon, Venezuela, Argentina to some extent, those countries, they get Bitcoin much quicker. Sadly, some of them go down the path of shitcoining and stuff, but that's the way it is. But I always refer back to articles that turn into book, actually. Alex Gladstein's Check Your Financial Privilege as a good way to educate people. People in the West, and I say the West, the developed world, will be like, yeah, we don't need Bitcoin. Everything works fine over here. Yeah, because you live in a very high trust society. The services do work. You pay your taxes, a lot of them. And, but at the same time, that they are extracting a lot from you without realizing. And you will one day wish you got into Bitcoin sooner, because they are still extracting a lot of wealth from you. And you are missing out on improving your situation, or improving your future wealth, without having a savings technology as Bitcoin. And we're now seeing this. We're not now seeing this. We're seeing this now for several decades in the West, in the liberal West, because thanks to these liberal policies, and I say liberal because obviously it's liberal can mean a lot of things, but I say liberal in the new sense of the liberal, which is slightly more tied to socialism. That this has created incentives and moves against family values and against traditional values and religion and so forth, and saying that these things are archaic and they're conservative, they're too conservative, they're extreme, or so and so. But these things were there, religion and traditions were there for a reason. They were there to promote family values, which is essential for a civilization and for people to create families, for people to protect their families, not just morally and ethically, but also with values. Where am I going with this? What I'm saying is that these countries, these developed countries, the liberal West, are seeing birth rates that are now way below their replacement numbers. I think the birth rate should be about 2.1 or 2.1 to replace the population and above to expand the population. But now we're seeing many of these countries way below 2, in the ones, and some countries even below 1. So economies are shrinking. Populations are shrinking, and that also means that that's putting a strain on the current financial Ponzi scheme of a fiat system, which means that we have more of an aging population. So pension schemes are going to be failing, and we're going to be trying to extract as much as we can from the younger generations, and they already have it worse off because of the fiat system has meant that prices of everything has gone up. And and thanks to fiat, the financialization and of everything from property to cars and everything has become much. I say cars are expensive, but no, but property has become much more expensive. To then saving assets in younger people can't save in anything, well, they can now with Bitcoin, but they didn't have the opportunity to save in something that would grow in value over time, which gives them stability, that gives them security. And that is essentially how civilizations are born, how civilizations develop, is through having strong private property rights and hard money, having the ability to have strong private property rights so the state does not take much from you or nothing from you, and having something that's indestructible and that will not be debased away by the state. So you have security into the future. And when that gives you the opportunity to be comfortable with yourself, so you can invest in yourself, then you can invest in having a family, and then you can invest in your community, and that has ripple effects. And that's how civilizations are born. And with that comes strong, I think, that's this push against traditions and family values is having huge detrimental effects on the younger generations, and they're turning them to be quite nihilistic, and they see no hope in the future, and they don't want kids. They don't have the money, or they just don't feel that. They think family is not really worth it. Maybe there's climate change that's going to destroy the world, the planet, and we don't have a future, and all this sort of stuff. And that's the wrong way to go about it. I think the family is going to save you from all this. Family is the most important part of what's being human. And yeah, I think Bitcoin helps protect all that.
Incredibly well said. And I could not agree more. And as somebody who's just, Carl and I had our first child, our son, he's almost a year old now.
25th of December, correct?
Thereabouts.
Thereabouts, okay.
Not quite there.
Was
but
it on the
almost.
Okay.
Almost,
okay.
yeah.
I just saw them. I remember seeing the announcement on the 26th. Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
But this is the thing. You're spot on. Like, this is what gives you hope for the future. But
right.
In order to have that hope for the future that your family can bring, you need to actually want to have a family and feel that you can support that family into the future. Yes. And I think if it weren't for Bitcoin, I myself would probably be much more nihilistic. But as it is, I am optimistic. I am hopeful. I'm excited about the future. And I cannot wait to see what the future has in store and what I can build in this future and what other people can build on a Bitcoin standard that, it starts with the individual, right? Moving to a Bitcoin standard.
It does start to individuals.
It has to start with you.
Yeah. It starts with the individual, and the individual can only survive with his family, and then it moves. Mm-hmm. The family then gets we as Bitcoiners will create that ripple effect. If you want to say what's the best way to orange peel someone, it's to have children.
Amen.
Yeah, that's it. Really, it's just to start a family, be the example yourself, and then that's going to set an example to other people, and that's going to have the ripple effect that's going to create a better civilization. It starts from us.
And I think that is a perfect note to wrap up on. Philip, thank you so much for your time here. This has been a treat. I look forward to doing it in person again soon. Where do you want to send people? I'll link your Nostr, I'll link your X. I'll link Jan 3 as well for anybody who wants to reach out or see what you guys are doing. Anywhere else you want to direct?
That's it. You've got all, those are the ones. Yeah, so Jan 3, X, and Nostr as well.
And again, I'd really recommend people check out Aqua. It's a great wallet. I've been loving using it, and I love that you guys are building out this top-down and bottom-up approach at the same time. I think it's huge.
Thank you. No, thank you, Walker. We've hopefully got big announcements for next year.
I look forward to it. Now the wheels are already turning. But thank you again, Phil. This has been a treat, and thanks to everyone who had joined in on the live stream on Nostr as well. We'll talk again soon, I hope.
I'm looking forward to it, Walker. It's been a pleasure.
And that's a wrap on this Bitcoin Talk episode of the Bitcoin Podcast. If you are a Bitcoin-only company interested in sponsoring the Bitcoin Podcast, head to bitcoinpodcast.net/sponsor or send an email to hello@bitcoinpodcast.net. If you are enjoying the Bitcoin Podcast and find it valuable, give it a boost on Fountain, a 5-star review wherever you're listening, or better yet, share this show with your network so more people can learn about Bitcoin. Or don't. Bitcoin doesn't care, but I sure do appreciate it. You can grab links in the show notes to watch or listen to this show wherever you get your podcasts, or go to bitcoinpodcast.net/podcast. And you'll also find the links to follow me and the show on Nostr and on X. Bitcoin is scarce. There will only ever be 21 million, but Bitcoin podcasts are abundant. So thank you for spending your scarce time to listen to the Bitcoin Podcast. Until next time, stay free.